Merhaba, Shalom, and welcome to the exciting new podcast Israel and Palestine Unpacked that is dedicated to exploring the complexities of the ongoing political situation between Palestinians and Israelis. Throughout the course of this podcast, it is my hope that we can delve into the historical and contemporary events and ideas that have shaped the course of this long-standing geopolitical and humanitarian crisis, as well as explore the ongoing and unresolved issues, while remembering the human cost, experience, and perspective. The situation has been brought into sharp focus nationally and internationally by recent events that have dominated our screens as well as our thoughts. The aim here is to be sensitive, as I understand that emotions are easily triggered. It is important to note that the topic will be approached from an academic position to unpack and understand the issues, and that all views expressed will be and are the views of the interviewees alone. Before we go into today's episode, it's important for me to give special thanks to Mike, a professional audio producer from Media Mihael, for composing the intro and outro music for this podcast, to Colin Mahalinden for help with editing and his professional wisdom, to Ricky at Login Studio for designing the logo, and finally to friends and family for their feedback. In today's episode, we are speaking to a Palestinian male from Nablus who talks about his background, about how his political views have been shaped and moulded over the years by his personal experiences, and how the media is playing a role in how our perspectives of the current conflict are being shaped. In the second half of our episode, we are chatting with a Canadian-Israeli YouTuber who speaks about his motivations for beginning his channel, how attitudes within Palestinian and Israeli societies have changed, and the possibility of mediation between Israelis and Palestinians, among other topics. I do hope that you find this episode of Israel and Palestine Unpacked informative, and if you would like to receive more content, you are welcome to subscribe and join us as we journey to gain insightful perspectives and knowledge together. Our first interview is with Musa, who was born to Palestinian parents in Saudi Arabia and who came to live in Nablus in the West Bank as a young child. He is married with 3 children and works as a finance professional and writer of short stories. Before we move on, it is important for me to say that this interview contains discussion around themes related to war. These topics may be distressing to some listeners. If this is something that could possibly trigger you, please feel free to skip the interview in part or in its entirety. Please proceed with caution and take care of your mental health. We join the interview with Musa talking about his background and about how his political views have undergone a radical change over the years.
Things are getting bad in every aspect, especially economy for the West Bank, where I live, and of course the security. But we dealt with that before, so we hope that things are not getting worse.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background. Who are you as a person?
Okay, I'm 37 years old Palestinian. This is how I like to define myself, despite the fact that I hold Jordanian documents, actually. I'm like from the small percentage who has the privilege of having the Jordanian documents. I've been living here since early age. I was born actually in Saudi Arabia. My father was an expat there. I'm married since 10 years and I have a daughter. I'm actually belong to a liberal family. I'm not religious. I would say on a political campus, I might be center-leaning left. That's everything I can say about my background.
So you've grown up during the course of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. How have your views been shaped by the particular political, economic, social conflict?
When I was young, of course, because, every community or a nation that has a revolutionary, let's say, part of its culture, it always has a heavy propaganda that's played on the society. So, of course, and plus because of the Israeli violence that I have been under all my life, I had that hatred against everything Israeli since I was young till, let's say, 10 years ago, where things started to change. You know, when someone is getting older and you become more mature, you start to think of things on different angles, and you start to question propaganda and everything around. So it's been actually a long journey to find a location in this bloody conflict where you feel comfortable with your ethical values. So again, I woke up in this life where I can see only checkpoints and my family and myself being humiliated and probably on daily basis. But again, things has changed just when I started to learn that you need to contact normal people from the other side. And this is actually a big problem in the conflict. The vast majority of both people from Palestine and Israel has never contacted normal people from the other side. I mean, I've been here for 25 years or 26 years until I met regular civilian man from Israel. All the experiences before was actually with the army and the checkpoints. So, and I assume the same for the Israelis. They did not contact regular and normal civilian Palestinians from here. And that's why the media shape the views on extreme level, let's say, if you know what I want to say. Like, I don't know how to say that. Since the 7th of October, actually, it took me 4 days to realize that Hamas has actually attacked civilians. 4 days, 4 long days. I only thought that they have attacked only the military bases in Otif. Otif, it's the name of the Gaza Strip settlements around Gaza Strip. So to see that extent of the media did not show us that they attacked civilians until the 4th day. So that explains why there are many people who are actually conservative and not violent was happy, because, you know, in the Palestinian mentality, the Israeli soldier is actually the same as the terrorist. It's same as how the Israeli reserve how they think about the Palestinian terrorist. So the Palestinian terrorist is sometimes our hero, which is not for everyone, and the Israeli terrorist is their hero. He's a soldier. So that's why many people was actually happy of 7th October. And that's why I'm talking about the media, because also the media now in Israel that does not show the people the extent of the horrors they are committing there in Gaza, and they did before in West Bank. So yeah, this is the conflict of it's actually too complicated.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It's like when we think about conflict, the first word that comes to me and seems to come to me in other interviews is this word integration, and the lack of integration across the land. Like, you've spoke a little bit about yourself, about how your views have been shaped, and about your background and about the changes. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that Palestinians, or even more specifically people from Nablus, actually face within the context of the conflict? You mentioned that the only interaction that you have are with Israeli soldiers. In addition to that, what other particular challenges do people face?
Okay, I will tell you some general experiences of negative experiences of what I have, and that's you can actually build on. Most of the people here has faced either little less or way more worse scenarios. So I was only 15 years old when the Israeli army invaded Nablus in 2002, and I was called on the speakers of the tanks, asking every male, even plus 10, to come down to the school for interrogation and etc. So you can imagine a kid with 15 years old, blindfolded, etc., etc. You can imagine all the horrors that you can listen for. I spent there 3 days like this in abandoned school, and in the same weekend, our house we were in, actually, because it was too dangerous that time, we chose to sit on the farthest room from the windows, the street windows, even though we got hit by a missile from a tank, despite the fact that our area was actually, there were no clashes at all, not even one bullet shot at the Israeli army. So to see that experience, how would you think a kid like me would feel again towards the Israelis? Of course, I will hate them at that point. So many others like me did not have the maturity to think and try to heal themselves from hatred, because I believe that hatred is just devastating for someone who hates, not for the others. So not everyone has the maturity and the effort to heal himself from that and try to find another way. And it's actually, especially on conflict and like this one, national and religious conflict, it's really difficult to walk in the other shoes. And if you try to apply that, you will find a balanced way to understand why the other is doing that and why we are doing it.
Maybe this comes across as quite a naive question, and I don't mean it to be, but what I'm reading from what you're saying is this idea that we need to step back from the extremes on both sides. You mentioned that there's lots of segregation. With that in mind, how do you envisage over the long term a situation that can overcome the issues that Palestinians face to provide self-dignity? How do we move forward, in your opinion?
I have actually two opinions on that. One is what I wish, and the other is the realistic one. What I wish is for Musa, for myself, the beliefs I have that land is just land, and everyone should live in that land under happiness and peaceful terms. And there's nothing in the world deserve that misery, and not even one place on the planet is sacred in a supernatural way. It's just sacred because people want it to be sacred. So this is actually the wish I want, is living in a land for everyone and coexist and seek prosperity and blah, 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 blah. And to be honest, I was very optimistic about these views up until 7th October, where I became more realistic, actually. And I believe that now we have added more obstacles to peace. Whatever is happening now, starting 7th October from Hamas and the subsequent event from Israel, that's the hell of using power in a crazy way. That is not going anywhere. That will leave us in a more realistic scenario where most of the conflicts in the world has been solved. And that's only one scenario when a superpower decided to do that. I mean, either in the American or any other country. If you look at any conflict in the history, Cyprus, Ireland, whatever you want, only when the superpower, the more powerful side, decided to put an end to that, it will happen. It's difficult to see because it's complicated. It's a different story than other conflicts. There's Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a huge obstacle. And even if you think that, like in a scenario, utopian scenario or whatever you want to say, where someone interfered and decided to do ethnic exchange between south of Palestine, Israel, the north, and do a buffer zone, and that buffer zone includes Jerusalem, where Jerusalem is considered like Vatican. Yeah, this is the only realistic solution I can see. Otherwise, things will keep deteriorating and people will keep using violence.
You're listening to Israel and Palestine Unpacked with me, your host, Porrick. If you've any comments, questions or feedback, please feel free to contact me at Israel-Palestine Unpacked all one word, @gmail.com. Or alternatively, you can connect via our Facebook page or X account, formerly known as Twitter. All contact information can be found below in the description. In our second interview, we are speaking with Corey, a Canadian Israeli who is the director of the International MA Programme in Conflict Resolution and Mediation at Tel Aviv University and the founder of the Ask Project. In this conversation, we began our discussion by talking about Corey's aims and motivations for beginning the Ask Project.
So I'm Canadian. I have lived in Israel on and off a lot since 1989. I've probably been here over 25 years. What I noticed, because I knew the Israeli side, by the way, I only really lived on the Israeli side. I noticed that people get in the media get things really wrong about Israel and Israelis, about motivations, about what's going on here, about what even these terms mean, two-state solution or Zionism or those sort of things. People just really get it wrong. Now, of course, there are multiple definitions for all these things, but they really just get it wrong. And so I just had this flash of why am I not asking people, regular people on the streets, what they think about all these issues? Because what people hear is through the media. So if somebody writing in the media or is writing through their own lens and perspective, so that sort of changes things a little bit. And then you hear from leaders, and the leaders speak a certain way, no matter who they are. So I thought it would be much more interesting to know what people think. And then I applied it. I tried it in Israel, really seemed to work on YouTube very well, and meaning I thought it was powerful. Nobody watched. And then I decided to do the same thing with Palestinians because I thought, I don't really know what they think either. So I want to know. So I found a translator, and we wander around cities of the West Bank, Palestinian cities and towns, and in Israel, and we ask people questions. And it's been really eye-opening for me.
For example, you've been at the Ask Project for about 12 years. In what ways have you noticed attitudes of ordinary Israelis and Palestinians changing over that time frame?
So each side is different. So I've noticed that I could summarize that both Palestinians and Israelis over the years believe less and less in solutions at all. Not that they really believed in solutions 12 years ago, but there was that generation, I'm part of it, in 53, of people who grew up during Oslo, who were young during Oslo, who were willing to give Oslo a chance. Not all, but a lot of people on both sides. And some of those, so I find people over 50 or 60 are much more open to the idea of a two-state solution. Anyone young, mostly Palestinian, they don't want any solution, really. And with Israelis, I would say the idea of voting for the left or the center has kind of died out because the right wing in Israel has become much more popular. And I think my explanation is they just analyzed the situation better and spoke to the people and then manipulated the situation for their own needs. That's my opinion on this. The only thing that really changed, really changed, is October 7th. That really changed Israeli society in a extreme way. It's very hard to find people who really believe in wanting peace with Palestinians. It really hardened people because of the extent of what happened and the extreme nature of what Palestinians did to Israelis that day. Yeah. Palestinians are obviously, because I was just in the West Bank the other day, are obviously horrified by what's going on in Gaza and in the West Bank with settlers. But they are sort of more used to it. For Israelis, October 7th was really a change.
So how have recent events changed your views personally?
It's very difficult. I would say, so let me actually go back 12 years ago. What I realized when I would interview, I knew the Israeli side. So I knew the right wing, and I knew there is not much of a left wing, but there's some people who are open to peace. That's what right and left mean here, basically, in Israel. So I wasn't quite that surprised. I would say Israeli settlers surprised me in their wanting to be seen as moderate, which that kind of surprised me. That I didn't expect that. I have met a lot of crazy settlers. I would say the majority are just people who are a little delusional or a lot delusional, thinking of what they think is going to happen, but doesn't matter. And on the Palestinian side, I realized very quickly that how the right wing analyzed the situation was more correct. Palestinians see Israelis and Jews as foreign colonists, which Israelis do not see themselves as colonists or foreign. And therefore, the solution for Palestinians is you have to get rid of the Jews. And that became more and more obvious with time as there's no solution. As Palestinians feel like they're losing more and more. So they think that the only solution is to get rid of the Jews. So within that, what October 7th did, it was all very theoretical. So I would go to Palestinians and I would hear, no, we have to get rid of the Jews. And I would say, does that mean violently? And they would say, if necessary, yes. And what October 7th did is, for me anyways, because I'm a Jew, is drive that home about how some people are willing to do it in a very animalistic way. Some people are very willing to kill civilians, children, women, old people, without really caring that much. Not all, obviously not all, but there are enough. So that was kind of hard for me to go back to Palestinians, and because first question I asked is, what do you think? Did you support October 7th? And only one person told me they didn't. And some of them actually had okay reasoning. I was okay with the reasoning, meaning it brought Palestinian issues to the forefront in the world, and people now support them more. And that I can understand, I can relate to as a person who understands what it means to be a minority and not feel like you have much power in this world. But still, the idea that civilians can be targeted on any side is very hard for me to hear, whether it's from an Israeli or Palestinian. It's hard.
Yeah. You have met settlers in the West Bank, and depending on what channel you watch within British and Irish media, you will see examples of settlers trying to push Palestinians off their land, to evict them off their land. Is this an ideologically driven nationalist or religious nationalist group of people that are trying to do this? Or
so first of all, okay, this is similar to, you remember when you were a kid and you used to look through binoculars, and if you look one way, everything looks up close, and if you turn it around, everything looks far away? Well, in Israel, the settlers who are forcing Palestinians off their land or attacking Palestinians, you almost never hear about. It's very rare that you hear about, and if you do, it's given within certain contexts. So, and truthfully, I have checked how much Palestinian land has been taken or whatever, however we're going to define it, stolen or bought or whatever. And it's actually a very small percentage of land, very, very small. Settlers live on, meaning if you take a settlement and you draw, boundaries around it, that's 3% of the West Bank total. And it hasn't increased that much in the last 15 years. I'll say 15 years, because under Oslo, it did increase a little bit. So, but in terms of when you speak to settlers and we call them the hilltop youth, that sort of young, 15 to 25, usually male, who go off and they say, I'm just going to camp out on this hilltop because I've decided it's mine. And they will chase off any Palestinian, or they'll do worse, they'll attack Palestinians. Within settler communities, they never talk about this, never. And it's like this dirty little secret that some of them know about and a lot of them just choose to ignore, as if it barely exists. And it really is, I have to say, from my experience, it seems to be a minority, but it's a minority who's doing a lot of damage and terrorizing people. I don't know how much of what you hear, or what I hear from Palestinians, let me phrase it a different way, because what you hear is through what Palestinians say, I'm assuming. What I hear from Palestinians about the settlers, I never know what's true and what's not true, because I try to go and Google it in Hebrew and in English, and I rarely find any proof of what they're talking about. I don't know what that means. I really don't. I have never seen violence when I'm in the West Bank every couple of weeks, not lately, but before. I have never seen that kind of violence. And when there was something that was documented, and I went to the settlements, I did that for about 8 months ago, because Palestinian homes were burnt down and cars were burnt. That just happened also, but I didn't go recently. But I asked them, and they gave me the reasoning. They gave me the context. I disagree with the context. It's disgusting, but meaning one of their settlers was murdered. They came from the funeral, and the kids got out of hand. That's how it was phrased to me, more or less. So then, it's kind of understandable according to them. I find it disgusting. I think any violence is awful and should not be in the hands of regular people. But how much of this, what you hear on the news, is absolutely true? I have no idea. I really don't. I wish, part of what I wish I could do is just follow people around as they experience these things and know and document what is true and what is not true. I have no idea, but I have no idea. And I don't live there close enough to know.
How possible, in your opinion, Corey, is mediation and conflict resolution between Israelis and Palestinians? And what factors prevent this on both sides?
Okay, so it depends on who you're speaking about, like which side. Overall, I would say I see no solution, none, period. There's no solution because neither side really wants a solution, really. Palestinians find it offensive to even say you can have mediate between Israelis and Palestinians. Most Palestinians, I can't say all. I would say my estimation is about 20% are open, very open to, two states or anything, any kind of solution. And then maybe another 20%, 30% are, you could convince them. You might be able to convince them with a lot of convincing. It would take a long time. But I would say most Palestinians, 50% or around that, that's my estimate. Not based on anything, just talking to people, find it so offensive that somebody would say you need to find a solution to this conflict together. They just find it, they see they've been colonized, like France colonized Algeria, or, this is colonization, pure colonization, and the Jews must go back to Europe where they came from. Now, they also don't realize that most Jews are not from Europe. It's actually a minority in Israel. Most of the Jews are actually Middle Eastern, and the Jewish source is actually this land. So that's why the Jews aren't going to go anywhere, and they don't have other passports and have nowhere to go. And when you speak to Israelis are okay with the idea of someone mediating this conflict. Theoretically, it's very theoretical, as long as nothing really changes for them. So I call it lazy peace. If we can have peace, I'm speaking as an Israeli here, if we can have peace where nothing really changes for me, I live in, a suburb of Tel Aviv, or I live in Haifa, or I live in Jerusalem, or even in a West Bank settlement. Nothing really changes for me. Maybe. And I'd have to trust the Palestinians won't try to kill me. That's a hard trust because the experience of both groups is the other trying to do something bad to them. So very, very, very tough. Israelis like to think they're very moderate and think that they're open to this idea of a mediated settlement to the conflict. I think there are a group of Israelis, 20, 30%, I would say, that's my feeling, who are really want it to happen. But the others just do not trust Palestinians in any way. Don't trust Muslims, don't trust Arabs, and they would claim, because most of the population of Jews in Israel come from Arab countries, they would say, do you know what they did to my people 70, 80 years ago? There's no way I'm trusting them. No way.
Okay.
Now, a lot of that is semi-true, meaning there were stories of a lot of abuses in the Muslim world. There were. But a lot of it is taking your own politics of today and kind of, projecting backwards. That's my opinion, because that's what I hear mostly from people. So but I still, okay, now after all that negativity, because I tend to be very cynical, I want the world to try. I really do. The only hope I see in what's going on is that now you have Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, who have matured internationally in the sense of, okay, Israel exists. We'll accept that. What do we do now? And I wish they could get the Israelis and the Palestinians into a room with all the countries who are pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, and say, guys, find a solution. Enough. We don't want this anymore. I wish that could happen. I really do, because I work in conflict resolution. That's what I do. And I don't think Israelis, right now we've been suffering because of October 7th mostly. Palestinians have been suffering for 70 years, longer. It's been 100 years, really. And both sides have been suffering to, I would say, Israelis slightly lesser extent, because the damage to Israeli society hasn't been as great as to the Palestinian society. But both sides need a solution. So yes, I want the world to force people, but it's got to be a solution that both Israelis and Palestinians could agree on and live with. I'm not sure. I don't see what that is. I really don't have a solution for that. I really wish I did, but somebody has to at least convince them to sit in the room to start with. And that's hard, because Palestinians don't want to sit in the room and Israelis are a bit spoiled and don't want to do it. So they don't see the point. So somebody has to point out why this is important.
As we come to the end of today's episode, I would like to thank both Musa and Corey for sharing their experiences and perspectives. It is through these conversations that we begin to develop a deeper understanding of the political situation in the region lived out through personal lives. In our upcoming episode, we're changing focus a little, where we will interview Nicole, an American journalist who has been living in Jerusalem for the last 20 years. Until then, what's left to say is thank you for joining us. And if you have any feedback or comments, please feel free to share your perspectives by getting in touch via email at Israel-Palestine Unpacked, all one word, @gmail.com, or alternatively via our Facebook page. All contact information can be found below in the description. I hope that you'll join me next time on Israel and Palestine Unpacked.